think in some core foundational ways, our society and possibly the world has forgotten what eroticism is. And in relation to that, what intimacy really is. And I think we've gotten these definitions confused for a lot of reasons, some of them being repressive, religious, and capitalistic systems, patriarchal systems, potentially, the repression of free sexual expression and the allowance to love other free consenting adults. Could be a lot of things, but if we want to get into semantics, and I think we should for some good reasons, I think people have confused eroticism with sex and intimacy with sex, like the act of sexual intercourse or related sexual acts, like the physical thing of doing the thing, whereas eroticism is the energy, the story, the anticipation, the process around it, the feelings of doing the sex. And it doesn't even have to be during the sex, actually. Same with intimacy. I think people use it as a euphemism for sex. You know, doctors will talk about like, oh, are you having any intimate problems? Or, you know, like in our intimate lives, we're doing okay or whatever. And like people mean sex, but they keep saying intimacy and intimate. And what that actually means is an adjective that describes closeness. I mean, at its roots, I think there's a lot of other ways to interpret that, but closeness in an erotic way, perhaps, but not necessarily, right? Like, I have a very intimate and close friendship with a lot of my friends, and it's totally platonic. It's not sexual at all. And so intimacy implies a revealing of oneself, a sort of vulnerability, a revelation of who you really are on the inside behind closed doors, perhaps admitting to some vulnerabilities, fears, insecurities, things you might want to hide about yourself, perhaps, holding space for someone else to do that. It's sort of like, can we be our real selves with each other? Can we make mistakes in front of each other? Can we not judge each other? And that, I think, builds intimacy in a huge way. And so when you conflate intimacy and sex, I think you depolarize the closeness and distance thing that I've talked about a bit. And Esther Perel goes into this a ton, and she's amazing about it. But when you have a lot of closeness, intimacy, an integration of your lives, a softness, a compatriot feeling, like we are companions, we are equals, we are teammates. There's a closeness there. And that's crucial for any long-term relationship, any healthy, conscious, thriving relationship. But there's no tension, there's no uncertainty, and there's no distance. Those are things that are the opposite to closeness, security, stability, intimacy. So when you have too much intimacy, in a sense, you lose that erotic distance, that magnetism that can happen. And you recognize this a lot earlier in relationships. Like when people first start dating, there's a lot of eroticism there. There's distance, the will we, won't we, the flirtation, the dance, the story that you're weaving together that is sexy and erotic and alluring all together. And it may or may not lead to sex. And sex isn't even the point of it, but it's a large component of that energy, right? So the erotic dance is happening naturally at the beginning of a relationship, dating, courtship, whatever. But once you collapse the space, once you get together, and that doesn't necessarily mean physically get together, once you intertwine your lives, once you begin to reveal a lot of yourself, to be vulnerable, to be messy in front of each other, whatever, there's this softness, this appreciation for who you are as a person, and that can de-eroticize your partner. That can make things feel less sexy. You're basically roommates, siblings, coexisting together in a space. And that doesn't mean you don't love each other. It just means that there's no flirtation, there's no push and pull, there's no dynamic at play anymore because you've equilibrated. There's not these like highs and lows. I don't mean emotionally necessarily, but energetically. Once you've equilibrated, it's like the water level has like found where the water level is going to be, and it tends to stay there. Doesn't mean it's stagnant. Maybe it fluctuates a little bit, but the fluctuation is very predictable and within a narrow band of fluctuation. So to recreate the eroticism at the beginning of a relationship means allowing intimacy to be there, but also introducing other energetic factors at play, if that makes sense. Our society has often made eroticism irrelevant in the pursuit of sex. And nothing against porn, but I think porn is a really good example of this. It's very outcome driven, outcome oriented. It's very efficient. It facilitates an end. It's a means to an end. And the faster and more efficient it can be, the better, right? The more likely you are to consume a particular video is if it does what you want it to do, right? And I think the visual component of our erotic minds and imagination is very important. I am not anti-porn, but I think we should call it out for the way it functions within our larger societal erotic context, right? So our society is very, go fast, drink caffeine, like hype yourself up, like close that deal, finish that project, on to the next thing, quickly. It's very fast-paced, and it's very outcome-oriented as well, right? Like, get that raise, earn that grade, earn that award, like, perform, do. And these are all elements that don't lend themselves well to eroticism. And if you want healthy, robust, blossoming eroticism in your love life, with your partner, whether long-term or not, you kind of need to do the opposite of a lot of these things that society teaches us are important. You need to not go fast. You need to not be outcome-oriented. Those are two crucial pieces of eroticism. I'm not saying you shouldn't have quickies. You should totally have quickies. But if you want to create a space where exploration and play and experimentation can occur, you have to sort of have this understanding, this implicit agreement within yourself and between you and your partner. Ideally, this could be something you can talk about to each other and plan for and discuss and infuse into your sex life. But you're creating that space where who knows what the outcome is going to be. Doesn't have to have an outcome. Orgasm is not our ultimate outcome here necessarily. It can be in some of your sessions, but play with the space where it's not. What does it feel like to just feel yourself? What does it feel like to just feel your partner? To play with the energies between you, to flirt with the possibilities, to surprise each other, to surprise yourselves, to indulge in the sensations that are happening in this timeless, expansive way. Because if you're working towards a goal, if you're like, we got to do this a certain way, we're going to hit these certain beats, these certain notes, and we need to have an orgasm in this specific way, and then we're done, then we're sort of confining and constricting what sex can be, and therefore robbing ourselves of amazing experiences we can't even conceive of until we try them, until we make them, until we build them, until we manifest them out of our imagination and into the world in front of us. So I invite you to think about eroticism and intimacy differently. They are not synonyms for sex. They are not euphemisms. They are not replacements that just mean the act of sex. Because then I think you are turning off this cloud of other words and concepts and experiences that are linked to sex, but not of sex necessarily. So play with what that means for you. Sit with that and try to stretch out time in a way that allows space for this to be something different. Because I think you constrain yourself and your personhood's possibilities, in the sense, if you know what I'm talking about. Like, the expansiveness of yourself, your erotic persona, can only come out and play when there's safety and room for it to do so. And I'm talking about space as in a conceptual space, not like, oh, pick a room, but rather allowing for what is and being present in the moment. It can be very meditative to be present with your own body and sensations, and to be present with your partner's body and their sensations, because it requires an awareness, a presence. You can't be thinking about the future. You can't be goal-oriented and be truly present at the same time. I think that's tricky. I'm not saying it's completely impossible, but it seems counterproductive to what you're trying to create if you are trying to create a fertile garden in which eroticism can grow in the many different forms, like plants, lots of different forms of eroticism. And your intimate connection can bloom and expand in that space as well. Because intimacy, without that mystery, that dance, that play, becomes just comfort. And that's usually not inspiring for sex and passion when comfort is in too high a proportion in relation to passion and play, right? Because comfort, if I were to make a metaphor about it, it's like laying on the couch and watching Netflix together and cuddling. It's great. It feels good. It's healthy for your relationship. I think that's lovely. But if that's all you do, if you don't introduce any activities or ideas or dreams or sensations that aren't part of your day-to-day comfort life, then you will fall into a comfort hole, I think. There needs to be an energetic shakeup that happens, and that is the eroticism, the play, the adventurousness, the just playfulness, the lightheartedness, the accepting, the openness. I think all these things are ways that you can embody your erotic self to invite in the kind of sexual experiences you want in your life. Enjoy!